Floods is actually another website. Do you want to talk about where you guys came from, how you made it happen, how long it took, what your role was?
Well, in many ways, our story is very similar to Graeme's, and my role actually ended up being very similar to Graeme's as well. Initially, though, it started as an experiment because I had to go to a Drupal conference, which is a software conference, and I needed a test site. So I started making myself a test site, and I thought, well, I need to put some test content into my test site. What's happening? So I sort of looked on the web and realised there was a flood. So I started putting some test flood information into my site just to test it. And next thing I know, the floods got a lot worse. So really the starting point for me was just putting some content into a test site. From there, as the floods got a bit worse, I went, well, maybe I could actually use the site for something useful. And I started looking around, and I discovered a massive gap here in Queensland with information sources. And this is no disrespect to any of the information sources, because individually they're all great. So you look at the police website, the Ergon website, the Brisbane City Council website, Volunteering Queensland website, all these other websites, they have lots of good information about their service, but they're very insular, they're all silos. Almost impossible to find information across all those sites, connected to your situation or your problem or whatever you're experiencing. And in a crisis situation, people don't have time to search for stuff. They want to know what's the tide happening right here, what's happening with the road closures, what's happening with the police, all in my suburb right now. And there was no way to find that information. So I don't know that we did a very good job of it, but we tried to create a central hub that actually pointed people from one place to all those other places. We actually probably illegally duplicated content. We did always credit sources, but we just took copies of, you know, all the ISPs status information, for example, and posted all that. So, you know, whether it's Internode or Beacon or Optus, posted the whole lot all in one place and said, here's your ISP, find it, there's your status page. We posted police information, we posted all sorts of, reposted a lot of information that was going up on the Facebook page from Queensland Police. We linked live to the live streams. In fact, I actually blogged most of the police media conferences live as they happened. So in most cases, I actually had the actual text up from that feed before anybody else, because I was just doing it live on the spot. And we, that's just got quite fast. And so basically we got all this information. Now that happened over a period of probably 2 to 3 days, but in the background some things happened that were sort of parallel to that and completely different. I had contacted a couple of other people in the Drupal community. Drupal's just a big software platform, and I said I was doing this, that they want to get involved. And next thing I know, I had about 4 or 5 developers in Sydney from Cross Functional, which is another organisation that we work with, who said, yeah, we'll help. So they started playing with the site because it was a brand new release of Drupal 7, and they had never played on a production site before, and so they thought that this is fun. And so they started doing some things and making it better. And next thing I know, we had some ideas. We had this massive Skype channel going that went for about 2 weeks, with about 40 people in it. And we said, well, there's always people offering up houses, and there's no way to do it properly. So we actually built the open beds concept based around, you know, sort of back of the envelope discussion over Skype. What if we could do this? And within about, I think, 24 hours, we had over 1 million hits. And by the end of the week, we had 4,000 beds up for offer. And we actually did talk to both Volunteering Queensland and also Flood Aid, and made sure that we weren't crossing boundaries. We were going to actually do what Flood Aid had done. For 2 reasons we didn't. They were doing it, and we had no money to do it with. So that was it was a good thing that we actually talked to them, because it meant we could say, well, you know, you concentrate on that, we'll concentrate on this. So over the period of 7 days, from really the Tuesday when I kicked it off on my own, I think by the next day I had about 5 people involved. By the day after that, about 16. By the third day, I had a team of 40 people in 4 separate teams, each with a manager that I volunteered to put in charge of that team. And so we had a development team, which had 3 components. There was actual maintenance requests, there was ongoing development, and there was also break fix, because we had massive server issues with the load. We'd crashed our server, our hosting providers on the net actually built a server farm for us and gave it to us for free, about 6 web servers, and then they've also offered us hosting for a year, so that's good. And
do you know how many hits you had to the site, Tim?
Oh, it was, I think about 6.5 million altogether. About 1 million in the first day, first 24 hours, and about 160,000 unique users. We served 45 gig of traffic in 5 days, and that's all text. Yeah, there's a few pictures that I lifted off Facebook, and the rest was text. So there was a massive amount of.
Were people able to comment on your page, or were there online forms to complete and things like that?
Yeah, that was actually some of the best stuff for us, was around the community that was developed. There was a huge amount of people who were volunteering, not just beds, but other information. We tried to direct them to other places. We built a little forum and lots of communication there about lost cats and dogs and horses and all sorts of information. People were able to find things through that place, offer missing people that they were able to locate through there. That's one of the biggest hit posts, was someone who was missing, and information about that. There was someone in the RAF who was serving overseas who managed to contact people who lived in his street, who then reported back to him on his property, stuff like that. So there's all sorts of amazing stories around the actual communications that occurred on the site. And also we use Facebook a little bit, but Twitter heavily.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Ergon and QPS and Volunteer Queensland, because you guys are all representing agencies and organisations that were heavily involved in the response efforts during the crisis. How do you think your online communications actually aided your core business purposes? Can we get a mic to James?
Our core business. Someone. In terms of the media and PA, our core business is to deliver information to the public. So it massively benefited that. And the stories like being able to tweet something and then seeing it literally like 2 or 3 minutes later on the news crawlers of the TV networks, all the TV networks. As we always say, complete with the same typos that we put in. they included there. And to hear that, the radio stations saying that they had our Twitter feed running in the studio, and when we tweeted something, they just reported it directly to the public. So we had this incredible sort of analogue mashup. It transcended the social media boundaries, the traditional social media boundaries, and I know people always talk about risks of that sort of thing, is that only those people that use social media will see it, and it was just not the case at all. So we could just deliver that information instantly to people who only had a transistor radio, or people who only didn't use the internet and watch TV and things like that. So it was massive.
Well, our response, we wanted to inform our customers, keep them informed as much as possible. When you lose electricity, you lose, some people lose phone connections, handheld walking around, those sort of things where communicating becomes quite difficult. So, and a lot of people have smartphones, so for us it was to be able to inform them of what was happening, set the expectations, and build actually, I suppose, customer advocates out there for our brand. Our communication is all around informing and educating our customers, and especially with electricity. It's dangerous. It can be, people's lives are at stake. So we need to make sure that was a key message that we kept delivering on for our purpose, and just really making sure that they could keep trusting us in a disaster situation, that we are there and we are responding and we're supporting them, and that's part of all our emergency disaster response.
Kat, can you talk about how you used online communications to actually just aid your core business during that crisis situation?
Sure. Well, obviously, one of our core business is registering volunteers who want to volunteer and matching them to an opportunity, so the registration was pretty core business for us. Another part we used online communications was to really try and promote the idea of effective volunteer management and volunteer safety, because I think that often gets overlooked in crisis situations. So that was really important for us to try and put out, like we worked with Queensland Help to develop a flood safety fact sheet and try and promote that. We worked with just effective volunteer management practices. So just trying to promote these messages that may or may not have got lost in the overload of information that was coming out, and trying to put that front and centre again. A big part of us online communications was supporting the Brisbane City Council and their volunteer efforts. So we just tried to share that information, educate people, direct people to the right place, manage some expectations, look after people. So,
great. Did you guys coordinate your efforts amongst each other at all? I know you didn't use each other as sources of information, but in terms of actually coordinating your efforts, did you check in with each other at any point in time during a crisis situation?
I've got the mic, so I guess I'm going to answer first.
Kat, Tim said that he checked in with you guys about volunteers, and given that both Graeme's site and Tim's site was all about volunteering and connecting people, how did you see their sites fitting into your business purpose?
We, as the peak body for volunteering in the state, we have an official role during natural disasters to try and support volunteering. So we work quite closely with our partner agencies, and we try to promote other organisations through our social media feeds. As to formalised relationships, that's the CEO's job, so I'm not aware of the discussions that went on at that level and the partners and the relationships. But from the online communications, we try to promote it from that angle, but that's probably as close as we got, working with them.
And I'm going to ask James and also Marie and Judith a question about internal communications. How was within your organisation, how were they following what you were doing online, and how were they keeping up to speed with the communication that you were doing out in the public?
Initially, we actually had Facebook blocked within our organisation, and I think 2 days into the emergency, they decided that wasn't such a good idea, and that members of QPS needed to get this information, and the information was all getting published on social media. We certainly have a lot of sort of anecdotal stories of officers being told when the traditional communication formats were breaking down, to keep informed, follow the Facebook page or go to or get a Twitter feed of what we're saying, because a lot of the traditional media communication formats did fall down in the crisis, and that was again just the most effective way to get that information to people on the scene.
One of the key internal communication channels at Ergon Energy is what we call the Daily Mail, which is an email newsletter that goes out to all employees at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, containing a variety of news. So the Daily Mail was used to inform employees that we had a Facebook and we had a Twitter site presence going, and to keep an eye on it for updates. However, one of the issues that we also had was that our employees were so keen to show their support and to get on board that a few of them made unofficial comments and responded to customer questions. In some instances, this wasn't always ideal because the information hadn't been verified, may not have been consistent with some of the other messages that we were posting up. So we used our internal comms channels to request our employees to, by all means, continue to follow Facebook and Twitter, but please don't make comments, leave it up to the formally appointed team to do so. So we had many employees who were following on Facebook. And then once we got the communications out to them that we didn't really want them responding on behalf of Ergon Energy, we found they were then making responses and comments that masked the fact that they were employees, but were still very supportive of what we were doing. So it was quite an interesting sort of thread of messages to follow there.
If I may direct another question to you guys, it sounds like your use of the tools was quite well thought out. Had you already been moving in this direction?
I'll best let Marie answer that one.
Yes, we were moving in the direction. We've done a lot of testing, as I said, 9 months behind walls. We're testing a lot of tools, how our RSS feeds could load information directly from the website. The challenge that we had was getting the management team over the line and understanding the tools. There's a little bit of, in our organisation, lack of understanding of the tools, Facebook and Twitter, what they actually offer. A lot of our management team first became on Facebook and Twitter when we launched our website, launched them. So, and even our chief executive first had a look at Facebook because we were on there. So a lot of education is required to get them to understand the tools, the system, what it's all about. So yeah, it's definitely a struggle. As I said, 9 months, we're waiting for QPS to come along and yay.
So that's what got you guys over the line?
Yeah.
Monitoring the success of QPS during the...
Yeah, I think they saw the opportunity then. It wasn't just talking about risk.